Hello again, Ian Stokey with Mastermind Games, back from my little break with Monsterpocalypse and Zor Raiden, Chaotic Red. So I'm switching back to the Reaper Master series, so once the Army Painter stuff is used up, I won't be using it again. So I'm still playing around with lighting. We're just going to have to see how things work out. Where is that paper towel? There it is. So, Zor Raiden, a member of the Shadow Sun Syndicate. Basically, giant cyborg ninja. Compatriot of Zor Maxim, whom I painted earlier. Now, officially, there's a lot of shiny... Okay, that brush is not going to work out, so put that away, try a different one. We'll try this one. So, officially, the Shadow Sun Syndicate is very shiny color-wise, but I want something a little darker since they are supposed to be Ultraman-inspired cyborg ninjas. And created by Sun Industries, the Shadow Sun Syndicate is a Yakuza organization, Japanese mob, and they switched to legitimate business when they found that legitimate business was making them more money than their illegal activities were, and began hoarding technology, doling it out incrementally. Putting out just enough to stay ahead of the competition, but not so much that huge leaps and bounds would happen, making sure they had more for later. But when the Harbinger Comet slammed into Earth, took out Chicago, they decided now's a kind of now or never on some of their most advanced tech, put assembly lines into high gear, made their little army, and took out one of the planet eaters that had crashed near Japan, sending a small army into its lair before it activated, before it, what's the word I'm looking for? Before it awoke, while it was still dormant, and more or less killed it in its sleep. And though many see them as shadowy heroes, others don't trust them. Just gonna get all the red right now. That is fighting me right there. Still fighting that blur. That has been my single biggest problem. I'm just gonna have to keep experimenting until I get it right. Unfortunately, the internet has plenty of criticism, but very little in the way of practical advice. And quite frankly, I'm getting more than a little tired of criticism of the unconstructive variety. Pointing out a flaw or problem is one thing, but just ripping in because you don't like something is not constructive criticism. And quite frankly, I deal with a lot of assholes. I'm just going to say that right now, and I'm quite frank, not just online, even more in my life outside of the internet, and I'm just quite frankly getting sick of it. Okay. Okay. Okay, that's got the red pretty good, so I'm going to let that dry and get the armor. And I just knocked out my camera. Okay. This thing is still fighting on focus. Blackened Steel 09205. So I'll have to do part of this off camera. I'll do as much as I can on camera. Mostly because I have to grip it somewhere. I glue these onto the base when I finish, so that that stays clear. But Zor Raiden is more of a hit-and-run brawler. Hit-and-run being the name of one of his actual abilities that lets him move after he attacks, and he can move when he's hit with an attack. Just one space, but that's something. And what else? Oh boy, there was something else. I'm blanking on it now. But he does pick up super damage on his brawl attacks when he hits hyper mode. Getting the breastplate here. Trying to keep it well lit, but also trying to keep my hand out of the light. Trying to get a nice solid coat of this. I don't have Zor Maxim's card handy right now, so I can't compare their defense and speed stats, but definitely looks like he's got slightly less armor than his fellow Zor. Just a few minor detail differences, really, nothing too substantial between the two. But for the second edition of Monsterpocalypse, they reduced the number of agendas from 6 to 2. So now there are only protectors and destroyers, with the Shadow Sun Syndicate falling in the protector category. But in the original edition, which was a collectible miniatures game, there were 6, and the Shadow Sun Syndicate were collaborators, which could work with protectors or invaders. I think the simplification of knocking that down to 2 agendas helps on 2 fronts. One, it simplifies list building, and 2, in the first edition, when they wanted to release new factions, they had to do 1 for every agenda, which is exactly what they're doing now, but we only have 2 agendas to worry about. It means you don't have to release huge chunks of factions. They can just do 2 at a time. And one of the Zors did appear in the short-lived Monsterpocalypse comic book that came out for first edition. It's implied that the blades are actually very fluid, being comprised of nanotechnology, nanites, and can shift between front and rear positions at will. But Maxim's got his facing back, and they're actually a little longer, but also thinner, while Raiden's got his forward facing and appear to be, while shorter, appear to be much thicker. Missed a piece on the red. I'm just going to touch that up real quick here on the thigh. Get back to that Blackened Steel. Get this left leg, and then I'll just have to do the right leg off camera. Once I'm done here, that'll be base coats. So, once all this is dried up, I can start shading and then go from there to the lighting effects. Okay. Let that dry now. Got the other greave on the right leg and start shading. Okay. Time to shade, and there's no way of doing this that isn't going to end up being awkward. Adamantium Black 09124. This is a metallic black. 1 part water to 1 part paint to thin it into a wash. So I find a good brush for this. There we go. Okay. Start on the chest here. Something about the Shadow Sun Syndicate designs also remind me of Mexican luchador wrestlers. I'm not sure why. Although thinking about it, a Monsterpocalypse faction based off of luchadors might be awesome. Okay, let's see here. Let's do arms next. I'm just going over the Blackened Steel on the first coat. Your base coat is going to be the middle value you want, basically the color you want. Your shade will be a darker version of that. Then your highlight will be a lighter version. Now the blades I haven't touched because those are getting hit with a lighting effect when I'm done. And while I'll be going over them in white to prep for that, there's also no sense in getting something that I'm just going to paint over anyway. Getting the head there. Need to make sure your paint is really thin. pretty much just watery, soupy and watery. That's what you're going for on that. Your base coat, use just enough water to thin the paint. Keep your brush damp but not overly wet. This phase, keep it nice and soggy. Okay, now, awkward grip. Keeping the brush wet and just going all the way down the other leg. Awkward again. So I'm right now just gripping by the edges of his blades. Alright. Let that dry completely, then I can shade the red. Okay, last of the shading. Red brick 09001. Again, thinning 1 part paint to 1 part water to 1 part paint, seeing it backwards. And going over the red. Keeping the brush nice and wet. Let's see here. Okay. Let that dry completely, then I can start the lighting effects. Okay. Alright. I've already prepped the lighting effects with matte white, which is a Warpaints color, and Amethyst Purple 09024. So I decided to prep the lighting effects off camera because it takes a while. It really does. So, different brush. So, the Amethyst Purple. Thinning with 2 to 3 parts water to 1 part paint. Just fill in the white. And if this extends past the boundaries a bit, it helps sell the glowing. So, of the 5 Shadow Sun Syndicate monsters from the first edition, so far 3 have appeared. The 2 that have, or at least in the second edition, the 2 that have not yet are Zor Voltis, who actually shared parts with Zor Raiden, basically having the same exact sculpt except for slightly different arms. And Zor Macross, which was their metamorph, which in the first edition were monsters that were basically like Voltron or Power Rangers, where they start out as a bunch of little guys called morphers, being unit-sized, and combining into a big monster for their hyper forms. That's apparently not going to be a thing in the current edition, but the monsters might still appear in a variant form. And they could certainly do Zor Macross without having him a metamorph. As for Zor Voltis, he was from the second series, and one of the monsters from every faction in that second Blind Purchase series shared parts with a monster from the first. So with that in mind, I think those second wave monsters that shared parts, I hope they'll be put in the game. I think if they do, they will end up looking quite a bit different from their original incarnations. The blade itself is going to be one of the last things I do because I'm most likely to hit it on accident while I'm filling in the rest. I picked out more details on Zor Raiden than I did on Zor Maxim. So it's going to be a difference between the two of them. Brush that little bit that got a little bit of spillover is fine, but I don't want to go too far outside the lines. Keeping the brush nice and wet during all of this. And the shade and lighting effects have the longest drying time. That's going to vary depending on heat and humidity. Shading goes the fastest, or not shading, highlighting goes the fastest. Paint dries almost instantly. Make sure I'm still recording, still having my program is trying to sell me a new version again. I did that last time, and while the results helped a little, I haven't been pleased enough with it to upgrade again. I might switch programs after a bit, but for right now I'm just going to roll with what I'm using now. I don't know if I should have done this as a lighting effect or not, but I'm committed now. Okay, now the blades. And Zor Raiden definitely looks like he has thick chopping blades. Get the rest of that little elbow bit there. Jewel, whatever you want to call it. Okay, let that dry completely. And I can, oh wait, I forgot he's got one little thing in the shoulder there. Alright, now let that dry completely, and I can wrap up in a bit. Okay, time to highlight. I'm gonna take a ragged feathered brush, something like this. It's the wrong paint, Vampire Red. No water, straight paint only. I'm gonna rub most of it out on the paper towel. Looks like there's nothing left. Give the camera a chance to focus on this. Oh, it does not like me. Okay, that might be as good as I get. And dusting the area to be affected. Going against raised areas. Refreshing the paint as needed. That's a bit too much paint. Focusing on the most readily visible areas. This one doesn't have a lot of undercuts, so... Okay. I need a completely dry brush, so I'm going to switch freely to another one. Let's see here. Gotta find the right tool for the job. This should be okay. And plate mail metal. Well, seems I've got exactly enough to do the job, so another substitute for that would be Tarnished Steel 09206, but looks like this is the last of the plate mail metal, so that's a army paint I'll be retiring now. A little bit of straight paint right here where the light got out of hand. I'm gonna have to touch up the red in a few spots here where I got a little out of control. That's okay. I still have some of that out, and I'll just grab another dried brush and okay. Need to let that dry completely, then I can glue it down to his base. That is it for painting. Okay, last step. Glue him on his base. So I'm using a thick cyan acrylate superglue. I like to keep the bases in the protective plastic here until the last minute. Now this is the stuff that will glue your hand shut, so be careful. A little bit along the bottom of the foot. I'm going to kind of center the way I like and hold that for about 20 seconds or so. Okay, that's got it. Needs to cure, but last step, which I cannot do on camera, is to spray him down with a varnish to seal the paint. But that is it. Zor Raiden from Monsterpocalypse. Got more Protectors monsters coming up. And let's get this thing to focus. Oh boy, alright. I'm gonna have to keep playing around with things until I get this right. Well, until next time, I am Ian Stokey with Mastermind Games, signing out.